Ever since the C70 came out, it has received a ton of amazing updates. So, is the C300 Mark III still worth it in 2024? Let's find out. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Alex. I'm one half of the Young's Photo and Film, a husband and wife photo video team specializing in luxury weddings and events. If you're not new here, things definitely look different. And if you are up to date on the podcast, then you know that we let go of our studio and are currently doing a build out at our home to be able to pump out more content to all of you. Hence the pile of boxes for the project sitting next to me. So let's get into the video. At the end of 2020, both of these cameras, the C300 Mark III and the C70, arrived on the scene. At the time, there was a lot that separated them. Since then, the C70's received a lot of firmware updates that effectively make it the same camera. So in 2024, is the C300 worth buying? Now let's start with the things that are the same. Both of these cameras share the exact same Super 35 dual gain output sensor. That means they are identical in image quality, in dynamic range, and they both have great low light performance due to the nature of a DGO sensor. And thanks to all of the firmware updates that Canon has given us for the C70 since it was released, they now both shoot Canon RAW, and they can both shoot in normal record mode up to 4K 60 and in slow fast mode at 4K 120 or 2K 180 if you're in the Super 16 crop mode. They both also share Canon's dual pixel autofocus, which includes face tracking and eye detection, and they both have electronic internal ND filters that can be extended up to 10 stops. So if you're just looking for the video specs for these cameras, they are identical. Let's jump into what makes them different. So let's start with the most obvious difference, and that is the size.
That's what she said!
The C300 Mark III weighs in at just over 4 pounds, where the C70 is half of that at around 2, and it has more of a DSLR mirrorless form factor. Let's talk about the inputs and the outputs. Obviously, with the smaller camera, C70 has fewer, but what they do have is very useful for the C70 and what it's designed for. It has too many XLR inputs. As far as outputs go, it only has a single HDMI output. The C300, on the other hand, has full-size XLR inputs and a dedicated SDI output, a dedicated HDMI output, and your general monitor output for the monitor that comes with the camera. So let's get to the monitors. The monitor on the C70 is about an inch smaller than the C300 Mark III, and it is actually attached to the camera. So unlike the C300 Mark III, you can pull it out of the bag, put a battery in, turn it on, and you're ready to shoot. With the C300 Mark III, you actually have to plug in the cable for the monitor to actually use anything on the camera. As someone who has frequently used the C70 with a 7-inch external monitor, I can say that I believe the C70 monitor is a little small for my taste, and after using the C300, I feel like the monitor is the perfect size. Another really important feature between the two monitors is while they're both technically touchscreen monitors, the C70's monitor allows you to actually change settings and navigate the menu system with the touchscreen. The C300 Mark III only allows you to use the touchscreen to change your focus point, and you have to use the buttons on the side or the buttons on the camera to actually navigate the menus and change settings. The last note on the monitors is that, in my experience, the C70 monitor works a lot better in direct bright sunlight. I did struggle a little bit when I used the C300 in bright direct sun to actually see the monitor. I had to up the luminance almost max just to be able to get through it because I didn't have a sunshade. Another thing that I noticed personally while using both cameras is that when switching ND filters, the C300 was noticeably slower than what I've experienced with my C70s. Now, it wasn't so slow that it really affected anything, but it was noticeable with the amount that I've used my C70s. It very well could be just this model of the camera that I use that was affecting it, but I thought it was worth noting in case it's not. So let's talk about another one of the more obvious differences, and that is the lens mount. The C70 has Canon's mirrorless RF mount, and the C300 has their traditional EF mount. It's also available in PL, but that's not what we're comparing. They both have their benefits and drawbacks. For example, most of my lenses are EF mount lenses, so having the camera that I don't have to use an adapter is really nice, and I did enjoy that when I was using the C300. But one major benefit that I like about the RF lenses, as well as the RF control ring adapter, is that control ring. And for me, I always set that control ring to my Kelvin level so that I can easily change white balance. The C300 Mark III, in order to do that, I have to push the function button, go to white balance and move it, or I hit the white balance button on the side, and then I use a dial to move it. But either way, it's a 1 to 2 step process, whereas with the control ring, I literally just turn the control ring and it's changed. Now let's talk about the media in these cameras. The C70 has 2 SD card slots. However, you can't use just any SD card. If you want to get the full features out of this camera, you have to use a V90 card, and those get really pricey. The C300 Mark III uses 2 CF Express Type V cards, as well as a third card slot, which is SD. The SD slot is primarily used if you want to record proxies to make editing more streamlined. CF Express Type B cards are also a lot cheaper nowadays than the V90 SD cards, so that could also be a point of contention in what you decide to buy. Another thing that makes these two different is with their dual recording features. The C70 has a feature that I use constantly, and that is the sub-record feature. One of the sub-features that I use in the C70 all the time is the 4K 2K feature, and that allows me to shoot in my A slot at 4K 60, for example, while the B slot records at 2K 60, so that I have a backup, but I don't have to have the same size card, and therefore save money in the cards that I have to have. The C300, on the other hand, doesn't have that feature, but it does have relay recording and dual recording. So if you want to use dual recording to have a redundant backup, you'll have to have 2 of the same size cards. Now this one was actually a little surprising to me after using the C300 for an entire wedding day. The battery life on both of these cameras is actually really good, even on the C300, which I expected to do far worse than it did. The C70 comes with a BPA 30 battery, however, I like to use BPA 60 batteries so I don't have to change them as much. I can usually get through an entire wedding day with a 60 and a 30, and that's it. On the other hand, the C300 comes with BPA 60 batteries, and the 10-hour day that I shot with this camera, I could have gotten away with just 2 batteries. However, I used 3 just to make sure it didn't die while it was recording during certain parts of the day. All in all, it does use battery faster. For the size and the features, that makes sense, but it still does really well for the batteries that it does need. Okay, so those are all the features. Now let's talk about price. As of the date of this recording, the C70 can be bought for $5,500, or if you can get it on sale, usually around $5,000. The C300 Mark III is $9,000 new. The used market is where these cameras become a lot more affordable for most of the population. I've seen the C70 on the used market lately between $3,500 and $4,500. And I've seen the C300 Mark III on the used market for anywhere from $65 to $75 and higher depending on what add-ons and things are included with the camera. In general, I think these cameras are becoming more and more attainable for your everyday videographer. But the question still remains, is the C300 Mark III still worth almost $4,000 more than the C70? In my opinion, it depends. I know that's the most political answer you'll ever hear, but it really comes down to what your needs are and what you're actually shooting. We shoot weddings, and while I loved having the C300 Mark III on the wedding day and probably will continue to use one on some weddings, I would say that for a majority of the wedding filmmakers out there, the C70 is the perfect candidate for those types of events because you literally pull it out of the case, put a lens on it, and you're good to go. There isn't much needed to use it and use it well. Whereas the C300 Mark III is very large. There's just a lot more that comes into play to use this camera. Not to say it's not good, because like I said, I did enjoy using it when I did shoot a wedding with it. But for a wedding filmmaker, I think the C70 is still the best bang for your buck. Now, if you're a commercial videographer and you do a lot of on-set work or do a lot of corporate work, the C300 is unmatched compared to the C70. With the plethora of inputs and outputs and the just massive expandability, there really isn't a limit to how much you can build out this camera to use for whatever you need to use it for. When it comes down to it, you really need to consider your workflow, your shooting style, and your budget, and what sort of things you are going to shoot with the camera before you determine which one to buy. Remember, there's no one-size-fits-all answer to videography, so take this with a grain of salt, but I hope you enjoyed this comparison. If there's anything that I missed or something you'd like to correct me on that I might have been wrong on, put it in the comments, and let's have a conversation about it. At the moment, Canon is actually rumored to be releasing an updated version of this and the C500 later this year. So I'm really interested to see what that's going to look like and how it's going to differ from this camera and make it better. So if you found this helpful, be sure to give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and we will see you next time.